Zambia, often hailed for its natural beauty, is a country where the mighty Victoria Falls cascades with thunderous power, where vast wildlife reserves teem with elephants, lions and giraffes, and where the people are known for their warmth and hospitality. The country's captivating landscapes and rich cultural traditions paint a picture of a paradise in southern Africa. But beneath this serene surface lies a deeply troubling reality, a complex web of social, economic, and political issues that overshadow Zambia's picturesque exterior. From the plight of child brides to economic mismanagement, corruption, environmental degradation, and hidden cultural practices that leave lasting scars, the deeper struggles of Zambia are as much a part of its story as its more celebrated aspects. One of the most pressing and heartbreaking issues in Zambia is the widespread practice of child marriage, a problem that affects thousands of young girls every year. Despite laws prohibiting marriage before the age of 18, Zambia is still home to one of the highest rates of child brides in the world, with almost 1/3 of girls married before their 18th birthday. And while this might seem like a statistic on paper, the lived experiences of these young girls are devastatingly real. In rural areas where poverty is rampant and traditional norms hold firm, families often see marrying off their daughters early as a way to reduce economic burdens or gain a dowry. For some, it's even seen as a method of protection against premarital sex, which carries a strong stigma in many Zambian communities. However, this practice strips young girls of their childhood, their education, and their futures. Child brides often drop out of school, cutting short their chances of gaining an education or finding gainful employment. Instead, they are thrust into the responsibilities of adulthood, caring for a home, managing a marriage, and often having children while they are still children themselves. The health risks are immense. Early pregnancies can lead to life-threatening complications, including obstetric fistula and even maternal death. Zambia's healthcare infrastructure is ill-equipped to handle these complications, particularly in remote areas, where access to clinics and qualified health workers is scarce. Consequently, young girls are often forced to give birth without proper medical care, endangering both their lives and those of their babies. The root causes of child marriage are deeply intertwined with poverty, tradition, and lack of education. Many families live on less than $1 a day and view their daughters as an economic burden they can no longer afford. In these situations, marrying off a daughter is seen as a way to relieve financial pressure, and sometimes even to ensure her survival. Cultural norms that value girls primarily as wives and mothers perpetuate this cycle, and in communities where child marriage is normalized, efforts to change these practices are often met with resistance. Even though some local organizations are working to end child marriage, offering education and empowerment programs, the road to change is long and filled with obstacles, especially when poverty remains so entrenched. Poverty, in fact, is a reality that affects nearly every aspect of life in Zambia. The nation may be blessed with abundant natural resources, especially copper, which makes up a significant portion of its export revenue, but the wealth generated from these resources has not benefited the majority of Zambians. Over 50% of the population lives below the poverty line, and in rural areas, that figure can be even more staggering. People in these regions often lack basic services like clean water, sanitation, healthcare, and education. While cities like Lusaka, the capital, have developed pockets of modern infrastructure and economic activity, they stand in stark contrast to the rural areas, where mud brick houses, lack of electricity, and subsistence farming dominate daily life. Corruption has significantly hampered Zambia's development, leading to the misallocation of resources, lack of transparency, and a weakened rule of law. While Zambia is politically stable compared to some of its neighbors, this stability has not translated into equitable economic progress. The political elite and influential business leaders often engage in practices that benefit a small circle of power brokers, while leaving the broader population in poverty. Foreign companies involved in Zambia's lucrative mining sector have been accused of exploiting resources, paying minimal taxes, and contributing to environmental degradation without facing significant consequences. Meanwhile, government officials, who are supposed to act as stewards of national wealth, have been implicated in scandals involving embezzlement, bribery, and misuse of public funds, further eroding public trust in institutions. This pervasive corruption directly impacts the daily lives of Zambians. Essential services like healthcare and education suffer from chronic underfunding, with rural health clinics lacking basic supplies and schools that are overcrowded and poorly equipped. In many cases, families have to bribe local officials to gain access to services that should be provided freely. This perpetuates a cycle of inequality, where only those with means can afford to access better healthcare, education, and opportunities for advancement, leaving the poorest and most vulnerable further behind. Zambia's education system is particularly affected by these dynamics. Despite constitutional guarantees for free basic education, in practice, access to quality schooling is limited by hidden costs such as uniforms, supplies, and exam fees. Many children, especially girls, are unable to complete their education due to financial constraints, early marriage, or domestic responsibilities. Schools, particularly in rural areas, face a severe shortage of trained teachers, and many students must share outdated textbooks, attend classes in makeshift buildings, and walk long distances to reach their schools. This not only hinders learning but also perpetuates cycles of poverty, as children without education have limited opportunities for improving their livelihoods. Healthcare in Zambia is another critical issue that reveals stark disparities between urban and rural areas. While cities may have more access to hospitals and medical specialists, rural communities often rely on small health posts that are poorly staffed, under-equipped, and located far from villages. This makes it difficult for people to access even basic medical care, and it's not uncommon for patients to walk for miles just to reach the nearest clinic. Diseases like malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV/AIDS are prevalent, and maternal and infant mortality rates remain high due to inadequate prenatal care and lack of skilled birth attendants. Healthcare workers are often overburdened, underpaid, and lacking the necessary resources to provide adequate care. One of the more hidden and culturally specific practices in Zambia is that of sexual cleansing. In some communities, widows are required to undergo a ritual called kusasa fumbi to cleanse themselves after the death of their husband. This ritual often involves having sex with a male relative or a designated cleanser, supposedly to ward off bad spirits and bring luck to the family. The practice is not only degrading to women but also carries serious health risks, including the spread of HIV/AIDS and other sexually transmitted infections. While such practices are less common today and have been challenged by human rights advocates, they continue to persist in certain rural areas, reflecting the complex intersection of tradition, gender norms, and health in Zambian society. Human trafficking and child labor are additional concerns that significantly impact the lives of Zambia's youth. Due to widespread poverty and limited educational opportunities, children are often forced into labor to support their families. This labor can include agricultural work, domestic servitude, street vending, or even involvement in illicit activities. Girls are particularly vulnerable to exploitation, including being trafficked for sexual purposes or forced into early marriages. Traffickers exploit Zambia's porous borders, poverty, and lack of law enforcement to move vulnerable individuals across the country and into neighboring nations for forced labor or sexual exploitation. While the government has taken steps to address human trafficking, the problem persists, hidden in the shadows and difficult to combat. Environmental challenges also cast a dark shadow over Zambia's future. Deforestation is rampant, driven by the need for land for agriculture, charcoal production, and human settlement. The impact of deforestation is multifaceted, leading to loss of biodiversity, climate change, soil erosion, and reduced access to water. Zambia's dependence on agriculture makes it highly vulnerable to the effects of climate change, including unpredictable weather patterns, droughts, and floods, all of which threaten food security and livelihoods. The mining sector, which is a significant source of revenue, poses environmental risks of its own. In regions like the Copperbelt, mining operations have led to severe water pollution, soil contamination, and air quality issues. Acid mine drainage and heavy metals have seeped into rivers and groundwater, affecting drinking water supplies and damaging agricultural lands. For communities living near mining areas, these environmental hazards result in health problems such as respiratory issues, skin diseases, and increased cancer risks. Despite the environmental damage caused by mining activities, accountability and enforcement of environmental regulations remain weak, with affected communities often left to fend for themselves without compensation or support. In urban areas like Lusaka, rapid population growth has led to overcrowding, the rise of informal settlements, and strained public services. Slums around the city have little access to clean water, sanitation, and waste disposal services, contributing to the spread of diseases and the degradation of living conditions. The informal economy employs many city residents providing income through street vending, small-scale trading, and casual labor. However, the informal sector is marked by instability, lack of labor protections, and low wages, leaving many workers vulnerable to exploitation and unable to access social security benefits. Politically, Zambia has maintained relative stability compared to some of its neighbors, but this stability belies a history of political manipulation, election-related violence, and suppression of dissent. While the country has seen peaceful transitions of power, it has not been immune to controversies around electoral fraud, harassment of opposition parties, and crackdowns on free speech. The media, though constitutionally protected, faces government intimidation and restrictive regulations, leading to self-censorship and limited critical coverage of those in power. Zambia's financial health is precarious, with an increasing debt burden that threatens the country's ability to invest in social services and infrastructure. Loans from international lenders have created a cycle of borrowing and austerity measures, forcing the government to cut public spending on essential services. The country's economic dependence on copper makes it vulnerable to market fluctuations, and any drop in copper prices can result in budget shortfalls and economic hardship. In summary, while Zambia may often be seen as a peaceful and beautiful nation, the reality for many of its citizens is far from idyllic. The country grapples with a multitude of challenges, from child marriage to poverty, corruption, lack of access to education and healthcare, environmental degradation, human trafficking, and gender-based violence. The struggles faced by Zambians are deeply interwoven and complex, affecting every aspect of life and holding back the nation's development. Yet within these challenges, there are opportunities for change. Local organizations, activists, and community leaders are working tirelessly to end child marriage, combat gender-based violence, improve education, and provide better healthcare. Zambia's young population, if given the right tools and opportunities, has the potential to drive economic growth and social progress. But for the country to realize this potential, there needs to be a concerted effort to address these hidden issues, hold leaders accountable, and create a more just and equitable society. The story of Zambia is not just one of challenges, but also of resilience and hope. Hope for a future where every girl can grow up free from the threat of early marriage, where every family has access to basic services, and where the nation's wealth is used to uplift all its people, not just a privileged few. To tell the full story of Zambia is to look beyond the breathtaking landscapes and friendly faces, and to confront the harsh realities that many of its citizens endure. Only then can meaningful change be brought to this country, rich in culture, spirit, and potential, yet in need of transformation and justice.